Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Kamal, do we have pretty much everyone online, or John, do you know? Can I give it a few minutes?
I think maybe 2 more minutes, if that's all right, just to as a couple more people roll in here. Okay, Josh, I think that did it. I think we have our full committee.
Fantastic. All right, I'll just get started. And I think, yeah, we're already streaming. All right, good afternoon. I'm Josh Sun, along with John Law, and we're with the Department of Planning and Development. Welcome to the July 13th, 2022 meeting of the Committee on Design. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to DPD's YouTube page. To our esteemed committee, thank you for volunteering your time to be a part of this advisory group. To the members of the public who are joining us, what you will see today and at future Committee on Design meetings are projects currently under review by DPD staff. The committee is a voluntary advisory body of design professionals that provide their expertise on design issues. This committee is not a substitute for Plan Commission, as it is not a forum for public debate, nor is the advice of the committee legally binding. It is the hope that today's discourse will lead to recommendations that will elevate the design excellence of the city of Chicago. The recommendations will be forwarded to DPD staff for consideration as they review these projects for Plan Commission and subsequent approvals. I will now continue on to the roll call.
I think that is the rationale for it.
Please state present or here if you are in attendance. Sarah Beardsley.
Present.
Reed Kroloff.
Is excused.
Brian Lee.
Present.
Juan Moreno.
Present.
John Ronan.
Here.
Ann Thompson.
Here.
Leslie Roth.
Here.
Hana Ishikawa.
Present.
Bob Faust. Renald Mitchell.
What is an existing?
Guacoldo Reyes.
Present.
All right. Before we get to the agenda, to members of the public, you are welcome to begin dropping comments and questions into the Q&A box. Committee members are invited to review this information during and after each presentation and incorporate the comments into the discussions. We will not be reviewing questions or comments from the public individually. To the applicant teams, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You have around 20 minutes to present your proposal. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after each presentation. We will now move to the first item on the agenda.
I think that their approach is
All right.
these two developments.
The first item is NOMA, located in the 27th Ward. NOMA is a mixed-use project located within two separate sites in the Westtown community area. Feel free to go ahead and share your screen as I just go through the description. The northernmost site will include the rehabilitation of an orange-rated historical building located at 509 North Union into a boutique hotel with 141 hotel keys. The remainder of the northern site will consist of 1,110 dwelling units, 145 parking spaces, commercial and retail uses with accessory and incidental uses. The southern site will include a phased project, 3 sub-areas, multiple buildings, and permit 1,159 dwelling units, 175 parking spaces, commercial and retail uses with the accessory and incidental uses. Please proceed with the presentation and state your name prior to speaking. Fernando, I believe you wanted to start first, so go ahead. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Just a really quick general statement. Fernando Espinoza with TPD. Before today's presentation, I would like to clarify the general purpose of today's presentation for the two proposals in the Westtown community area. The proposals are part of two proposed master plan developments. The applications were introduced to City Council on Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. Both applications are under review by TPD and several other city departments. The review of both PDs is ongoing. Neither application has received approval to be placed on Plan Commission public hearing for a meeting agenda. As part of the PD applications, the developer is seeking approval to rehab the existing building in 509 North Union into a hotel. It is their phase 1 project. Additionally, the developer seeks to review future developments through the site plan review process. Today's COD meeting will not review specific building designs or building materials. COD review will focus on the urban design of both PDs and on massing, tower form, height, and the public realm. Once COD recommendations are issued, the developer will address those comments in the written response to DPD. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you. Please proceed with your presentation.
Excuse me. Thank you, Fernando. I'm Jeff Shapak with Shapak Partners. And on behalf of our team and our partners, thank you for having us today. With me on Zoom is Katie Jenkydale from DLA Piper, our zoning counsel, Iran Chen from ODA Architects, zooming in from New York, and Jake Waller from Ekanoff Saunders Architects. We've been very busy developing in Fulton Market District for the past decade. In 2016, we began acquiring property adjacent to Fulton Market District, which is the area we're speaking about with you today. It is an area that's just north of Fulton Market District, bound by Hubbard to the south, Halsted to the west, Des Plaines to the east, and the Ohio Street Bridge to the north. We have learned a lot building multiple asset classes throughout Fulton Market District and creating Chicago's central social district with features like our Muse, an open air arcade located at 167 Green. And now, after having been through COD with you at 170 Green, we're expanding the Muse concept to open it up to the next city block in Fulton Market. Here, we're also very excited to continue to design and create public realm space into our designs. Today, we're focused specifically on the massing of what we call Block G, and to show you the Salvation Army building, as Fernando and Josh referenced, an existing structure, orange rated at 515. Actually, I think a lot of people call it 509. We internally refer to it because of where the front door is located as 515 North Union Street, which is Union Street between Grand Avenue and the Ohio Street Bridge. We're very excited to continue to bring multiple asset classes to the near west side, including hotel, multifamily residential, office, retail, food and beverage uses at grade, in addition to public realm space. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we began acquiring property in this section in 2016. Our most recent acquisition and the last acquisition of all of the parcels is the Salvation Army building, as well as their adjacent land on Des Plaines. I'd like to, can we go to, I don't know who's in control of the slides. I believe you are, Ron. Could you go through the next few slides? Next, please. Perfect, thank you. This is a slide that I think best shows some of the excitement of what's happening between Fulton Market District, which please note in the red, in order to make this slide work, you're not seeing all of Fulton Market District. It's cutting off where Ogden Avenue is, but you're seeing Fulton Market District in the lower left. Directly north of it in the orange is this section that we're talking about today, specifically where you're going to see some highlighted blocks in black on the orange, and then its connectivity to what is known as the River District, the former Tribune printing plant site, going all the way to the north above Chicago Avenue, where another developer is proposing more multifamily, and then crossing over the river to Halsted Point, which is an approved PD by another developer for multifamily residential along the Chicago River at the former Greyhound site. The connectivity from red through orange to blue to green within the 27th Ward on the near west side is incredible, in our opinion. Next, please. My slide didn't change. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Ron. Before I hand it over to Jake from ESA to talk about the building known as 515 North Union, also known as the Salvation Army building, I want to just spend a minute talking about neighborhood circulation. We were very excited in 2012 when CDOT and CTA cut the ribbon for the Morgan, Green, and Pink line in Fulton Market District. And pre-pandemic, I believe we ended up with just over 1 million people in ridership at that station, which is incredible. And I don't know the numbers post-pandemic, but I hope they only get better as people are learning how to change trains at Clark and Lake and elsewhere to get to Fulton Market using that station. This neighborhood just north that we commonly refer to as NOMA has a blue line. That blue line stop is the last stop from O'Hare Airport before you hit the loop, and the first stop outside of our central business district known as the Loop. It originally had two station entry. Well, I shouldn't say originally. I think it's had many more in its lifetime over 50 or 60 years. It had two stations, the one next to the word CTA Blue Line, the one directly across the street on Halsted, that have been there for a very long time. And during the pandemic, a location was added back as there was a stair adjacent to the Piccolo Sonio site, which is at Grand Avenue and Halsted, which is the southwest corner or northeast corner of that block. This slide is showing you neighborhood circulation and the importance of Halsted Street north-south, Milwaukee Avenue on Hypotenuse, and Grand Avenue east and west. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, before you go, Jake, this is a slide that shows some existing context. We think it's super important, similarly to Fulton Market District, is these are old neighborhoods that have some great character buildings. And those character buildings, while we don't own all of them, we own the Salvation Army building and then adjacent sites that are dilapidated 1 and 1.5 story old industrial buildings. Many other character buildings exist there and have been there for a long time and are incredible. And it's that juxtaposition of old and new, the grit and the authenticity that makes these neighborhoods so incredible. One other thing I want to note while we're on this page is I do personally love a lot of the borders. While very porous, which is important, I do like the metro train station that runs past the Salvation Army building, similar like the High Line, although this is still an active metro train rail, looks a lot like what the High Line once looked like many years ago. It's that angled street, that angled track in the air, as well as Milwaukee Avenue on an angle, adds a lot of interest to what is normally a standard grid. And then of course the Ohio Street Bridge, which is actually a wall by the properties we own. It's not porous at that point. It's further porous in the Tribune Media site. And then of course the raised Hubbard tracks, which are very porous and have many underpasses from Holstead to Milwaukee to Des Plaines and on. Next slide, please. Jake.
Thanks, Jeff. Jake Waller, principal and architect at Ecknoff Saunders here in Chicago. 515 Union is an existing, obviously, 6-story, 90,000 square foot masonry warehouse style building. It was originally built in 1891 as a margarine factory when margarine first came to Chicago and the Midwest at the late 1800s. It was later doubled in size in 1917 and then sort of connected again in 1947 in this streamlined modern connector piece between the two buildings. The Salvation Army had occupied and owned the building since 1930 up until just recently. Next slide on. Our proposal includes the preservation and restoration of the building and the primary facades, but also includes a 2-story addition to the southern half of the existing structure. This addition, likely to be clad in a complementary metal material, allows this adaptive project to achieve a high destination dining, hotel amenities. We intend this building, once revitalized, to contribute substantially to this neighborhood and the placemaking that you're about to see. Ron.
Thank you, Jacob. We're very excited to be here today and to be partners with SHAPEC and the team on this vision plan. I think it's important to understand that this is first and foremost an urban vision plan. It's about expanding the public realm, the experience at the street level, about creating more equitable opportunities for experiences around the street, and predominantly be able to connect people from around the city at the corner of Grand and Halsted towards the riverfront through a series of experiences. The buildings that we're still working on are mixed use by nature. We've got the hotel, as Jacob pointed out, residential, office, commercial, all are positioned essentially to create two things: stepping volumes towards the center of Grand Street that creates kind of urban visibility and openness and importance to Grand Street, and also to tear down towards the intersection with Milwaukee and Halsted, where the CTA brings many people in and out from the neighborhood. As Jacob pointed out, Salvation Army was the first anchor or the first resources in the existing neighborhood that we are activating. But we also realized right across of Union that there's the Art Walk, which is a kind of spontaneous art interplay on the elevated train tracks, which we think has a huge potential urbanistically. And we were thinking how we start connecting the hotel to the Art Walk through Union and creating Union Avenue as a pedestrian or predominantly pedestrian experience. First, underneath the overhead track, which we propose as an art plaza. Then the activation of retail across all along Union Avenue, creation of another retail plaza that anchors Union on the southern part of it, and then connecting it through the block of what we call extension restaurant muse into a sort of a beer garden or restaurant F&B plaza that eventually would connect us back into the art wall. And the whole idea is to create a meandering sort of experience, pedestrian-dominated path that would be a string of pearls, if you will. At the corner of Des Plantes, we end Grand. We propose a cultural, mixed-use culture institution that would then connect with a market, a little bit like Chelsea Market, back into the hotel and finish the urban loop of connectivity. The illustration that you see here in 3D just gives you a hint of what that might look like at the ground floor and how we choose the program at the ground floor to activate each one of those programs to be successful. Here is the Art Plaza. As we all know, there's a series of steel columns right now supporting the overpass of the train. We're thinking this is a great opportunity to create an art installation. It's already existing public space, and that would kind of support that intersection of Union as an anchor. It would also connect into the entrance and the restaurant of the hotel, and then using existing crosswalk to a much widened sidewalk on Union that kind of anchored with the retail plaza. And that will connect back into through the Muse and through the food hall that you see here, back into the art wall.
Hi, sorry, just want to interrupt. You have about 10 minutes left.
Okay. The culture institution at the corner of Grand would then connect back into the hotel, as I pointed out. The buildings we propose are still very much in progress and conceptual level. The basic idea is to go from G as the high point to A as the low point and back into the intersection of Halsted and Milwaukee. And right now we are starting to design G, and we want to share with you a few options of massing. None of it clearly is cast in stone yet. The initial massing was meant to set back from Grand Street and create a vertical anchor on Ohio. We are looking at splitting that into two buildings on a podium to reduce the height, but also create a gateway of visibility from the Salvation Army Hotel roof south. And then we're looking at a single tower, which will bring more residents to the top and be able to, through an L shape that goes from cantilever to stepping, to create a dynamic form that indicates the new creation or the support of NOMA. So these are the three typologies that we are investigating at this point. We'd love some feedback on. A few views from the Grand Street. As I said, this is very generic. We're just starting the process. One thing we've learned on the left, that the tower on the left would create a lighter top. However, it create a pretty massive bottom. The center piece will create two towers instead of one, but able to reduce the height, but at the same time, create kind of a built wall. And then the one on the right, which we think is a combination of the two, allows us to create an elegant structure that, as I said, would create a very dynamic form from different angles and different viewpoints of the city and embrace the center of this entire vision plan on Grand. We are not at a point of designing facade. I'm sharing a few current buildings we're working on, ODA around the world, but I think that we'd like to use a strong form for the building that would be appreciated from far away and would anchor that character of the entire neighborhood, will become both iconic as well as celebrate people. We're also thinking of somewhat of industrial gridded facade, like the image on the bottom left, or playing with simple materials and volumetric play that reflects the character of the history of that neighborhood. And as it relates to the presence of pedestrian scale, this is something that become a hallmark of our work. We are looking how we create activated anchored places that are also destinations, not only by creating open space, but by supporting it with a diversified program at the ground floor in the post-pandemic era where retail is not enough. We have a quick shadow study that shows a vertical tower, in this sense, the G tower, and demonstrate only that in the worst case scenario, in Southern Light midday, the shadow that stretches basically go across the highway on the north and the empty triangular lot across from it, and doesn't create a shade on any important public area. Jeff?
Hi, my apologies, I was on mute. Josh, that wraps our presentation, and I wanted to hand it back to you. The only thing I did want to add that I know Jake and Iran and I mentioned, but I'd like to add a little more color to it, is very similarly to our in 2012 when we announced Soho House in Fulton Market District, or sorry, at the time on Green Street, and then used it as a catalyst to brand and create a central social district 15-minute neighborhood. We are intending very similarly with Soho House. This is not Soho House, but I meant more in a building with a rehab of the building and celebrating all of the great qualities of an old structure in an industrial nature like Soho House, like we did with Soho House. We intend to, in the Salvation Army building, preserve that building, invest in that building, and build a hotel and food and beverage and welcome everyone in, which obviously we know that if that became something like an office building or a residential building, we wouldn't be able to welcome people in, only those that live there are guests. And with a hotel with open lobbies, with food and beverage, etc., similar to what we did at the Hoxton and Soho on the ground floor, welcomes the community into the space. And we think that's very important. Josh, back to you, or Fernando.
Thanks, Jeff. Committee members, please take a moment to review any comments received from the public in the Q&A box. I believe you have a few comments, and incorporate them however you see fit. The floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant. Please raise your Zoom hand and we will call on you. Thank you.
Correct aspect of the code without having a survey that goes along with the corrected. Now, maybe you're lucky. Yeah, maybe you're lucky. Maybe the owner has a survey of his property. You can say, hey, we use an old survey.
I guess somebody's unmuted and having a separate conversation.
We're in a very crowded office and we don't have walls. Sorry. Ann Thompson.
And you're on mute.
Thank you for the presentation. First, I just wanted to comment on my appreciation for your emphasis on the adaptive reuse of the Salvation Army building. I think it's a terrific use of preserving in an active way the architectural heritage here, and will lend some authenticity to the overall development. I do have one probably easy question. As you conceived of the master plan, have you thought about, you have a lot of active open space that's more public plaza and it looks like an urban hardscape. Have you thought about layering in green space to the overall master plan?
Jeff, do you want
Ron, you can, yeah, I'll start, but I know that your vernacular will be much better than mine.
You can, sorry, you can also share your screen to pull up the visuals if you think that might help.
Oh, okay, we can do that and go to the page that sort of shows all of it. And the answer is yes, there will absolutely be green space. we're showing in a very similar manner to the way in which we showed our original Muse at 167, and then the expanded, much wider open space Muse at 170 green. Very similar in idea this time. In addition to muses, there's a plural of muse. We're also doing open plazas, corners of buildings that we won't build out to the corner because due to Milwaukee's a hypotenuse street. We have a couple of them in Chicago. They're incredible. New York City has them as well. Many cities have them. We have one right here, and it's great because it breaks up the grid. So we have ways to do things with our sites that we otherwise in a perfect square rectangular wouldn't be able to do. So the answer is absolutely to green, both at grade as well as green up above throughout the buildings on setbacks as well as rooftops. We absolutely want to have green incorporated into all of it.
Thank you, Jeff. I just might add green and art, two biophilia and connection to culture, two things we consistently discuss in our development, our meetings. There are going to be green. I'm trying to open the master plan, so bear with me for a second. But there's going to be, there we go. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for landscape along the streets, but especially at those plaza that I've discussed. The art plaza is basically covered by the train, so that's going to be predominantly an art installation. But the retail plaza, which is the second one on the right, is a great opportunity for shade, and we're definitely going to embrace that opportunity, as well as, if you can see, I know it's small, at the beer garden, we're envisioning the center of that plaza being an anchor of art surrounded by landscape. We also understand there's a high traffic of bicyclists, especially from Milwaukee Avenue. It connects a lot of people by bike to the rest of the city, and that would be a great area to have bike parking and areas that sort of allows people to wander around. As for art, we're thinking of combination of maybe local artists in both murals and other installation of art. This is all very premature, but it's part of the vision. And you're on
Thank
mute.
you. Thank you. I do appreciate that, that answer. I guess I just would encourage you, with this kind of density, you're going to have dogs, you're going to have children potentially in this neighborhood. And a lot of those opportunities that you discussed, well, I think are exciting and important and filled with possibility, are not necessarily green space. It's entry plazas. So thinking just quite practically like grass, places for people to linger and interact with nature, in addition to kind of more hardscape plazas and trees and planters and planting crates. But if there's opportunities for pocket parks with green space, more like grass, a grassy park, that would be, I think, beneficial to this neighborhood.
Noted, and thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I believe, Hannah, you're next.
Thank you for your proposals. So excited to see this area activated. I lived around this area for 6 years, maybe about 8 years ago, even before I think Dawson had redone itself, and it's changed quite a lot in that short amount of time. That Starbucks on the corner wasn't there, etc. When I did live here, I really do. I want to emphasize Anne's point that I used to walk my dogs in an empty parking lot because there were no green space. The nearest park space is across the river in this area, or you have to go all the way to the West Loop. It's really devoid of parks, and especially this new region. And I'm sure that this is why you're suggesting redeveloping this area, is a little bit of a no man's land because it is bound by the ramp. It's bound by the railroads. Milwaukee is a super busy street, and then of course the river. It is also a very dark and loud area because of those kind of infrastructures that is all around it. And so I do want to, make sure that there's a livable condition for a lot of these residents that you're trying to put in this area. One question is that, have you talked to CDOT about all of these mid intersections within some of these streetscapes? And what were their responses?
The answer is yes, we have spoken to CDOT. The plan that we have has been updated. We've eliminated the mid-block crosswalking on Milwaukee Avenue. Even though Milwaukee theoretically dead ends a block south of that, it still is probably not the right appropriate. It's probably not the appropriate use of mid-block there. So we've redesigned that such that you would cross at the proper crosswalk to the corner, which is why we're not going to run a Muse through Block A and instead have a Plaza on the corner, which could then continue to the crosswalk across Hubbard Street. For those of you that haven't been over there, and I know you said that you once lived over there and you are over there, but those of you who haven't been there recently, Hubbard is incredibly wide and Union is incredibly wide. So we've been talking about DPD and CDOT about what we can do specifically on the Hubbard Street side where we are calling it out as an art walk. There's an opportunity because there's significant land and a very wide street for a very long park to be built in the future, which would be 1 mile long from the Ogden Street station, which is hopefully a future metro train station that will be built, all the way back to Blummer's Chocolate. In the 2021 Fulton Market Innovation District Land Use Plan update, there's actually a rendering showing this park as an opportunity for CDOT, DPD, and other groups to come together to make a decision as to exactly what can be done with Hubbard. Union, that Muse that does cross from the east side of Milwaukee Avenue across to Union. Union is an even wider street and relatively unused street for 2 blocks. We do own a majority of the real estate on both sides of that street for those 2 blocks. That mid-block crossing is something that CDOT is very interested in because they think there's more work that can be done to Union Street besides what it looks like today, sidewalks and street as well, not to mention our land, but of course public right of way. So they are very open to the idea of a mid-block cross in that location.
Excellent. That sounds very exciting. And then my second question is there a reason why you're bringing up this pedestrian corridor up Union? And like you mentioned, Union is currently not a very busy street. It's really this 2 blocks that's right here at this area and it kind of ends. And so I just have a question why you took the pedestrian way below the train tracks and then through Union. Is there any kind of other idea about making Union a more pedestrian friendly experience instead of kind of bringing it to the cultural park east towards Grand?
Yeah, so the idea is to make it as pedestrian friendly as we can. That's something we've been talking to CDOT and DPD about. That idea has been very welcomed by both. It's just not as far along as what we are planning for our blocks. One is public right of way and one is land that we own, so we can start planning our own land faster. We absolutely do agree that it should be very pedestrian friendly. We have spoken to many neighbors who agree with that as well. It is a very wide street. It is very empty and not used. In fact, many of the people who use it were industrial users who no longer exist in the neighborhood and certainly on that street. And furthermore, it actually reminds me a lot of when I acquired what is now known as the SOAS building at 113 North Green Street in February 2012, when back then in 2010 through 12, when I was acquiring it, you could sit in the middle of Green Street and have a cup of tea and not be hit by a car because there was no one there. And today that would be a very dangerous proposition to ever sit or be standing in the middle of Green Street. So I think that is an example where more should have probably been done to Green back then and now can't be done in the same ways as our ability to impact and affect Union with some of the things you're asking us about are things we very much want to do and look forward to working closely with DPD and CDOT to find that vision and execute on that vision.
Just to add to Jeff, that we're very sensitive to situations of dead-end pedestrian experiences because they usually don't necessarily end up being very active. And that's partially why we're using at Union on the north side. The restaurant of the hotel, which is currently basically a one-story structure, will become an amazing gateway that would connect that point back through the market on Block G back into Grand. And so essentially what we're proposing is sort of a circular pedestrian behavior that never ends with sort of a dead end. And therefore we feel these anchors would promote many more people to walk in these areas.
So the kind of the behind the Salvation Army building, that corridor will be public at all times.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Juan.
Great, thank you. And congrats to all for the presentation. And just, I have two comments. Jeff, something you said really got my attention, the reference to the High Line, that, you know, the fact that the elevated train is not to be ignored. I just would encourage the team to take that even further, meaning it's such a unique location. You're really at this wonderful point of arrival and departure from our city, from Ohio, from the train, like you said, and as been mentioned, Milwaukee. It's a incredible anchor site. And I think those moments and even some of the views that you were showing, I would encourage the team to take views from all those vantage points, because again, it is such a fascinating moment of arrival and departure in the city, and the scale that you're creating there. You'll have such an unbelievable presence from each of those. So I would just encourage the team to push that even further. And Iran, I think it's great to see your work here in Chicago, and certainly your firm has done a great job of, you know, successfully executing the cantilevers on towers. So I think it's exciting to see. I would just also encourage that, you know, because it's a fringe site, I know we have a tendency in the city to reference just the past and the old materials, but in addition to that, you have a chance to really start a new conversation. And you guys have done a great job with materials in the past and where to push where the future can go, because it's such a unique area that's going to completely evolve with what you're doing, the casinos, so on and so forth, just to help push this in directions that maybe the city hasn't thought of before. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
All right, I think we have Leslie next.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentation. I really appreciated Jeff talking about the focus on creating welcoming space. And, you know, to kind of want the team, you know, some of my comments are just directed to the team about how to push that a little bit further, particularly in the public realm. As a few other folks have mentioned, this is a pretty difficult and challenging area of the city to work in. There is a lot of infrastructure. And so taking a sensitive approach to how the project responds to that infrastructure and also create activated public space is going to be a challenge for the project. I would encourage the team to think about relying less on intra-building connections and really focus the energy on the vibrancy of the street. Jeff, you mentioned the width of Hubbard and Union. I travel these streets on a regular basis as I move through here. And you're absolutely right that there's a lot of opportunity in creating a more vibrant public realm along the streets that exist, including connection to the art walk and potential for additional parks, green space, open space, and plazas. I do think, however, that it's a little bit misleading experience right now of Union going under the rail tracks, and that this should really be thought about, particularly with the relationship of the cultural space on the east side of the building on the north parcels. The cultural space as it exists is completely disconnected from the activity that you're creating throughout the rest of the site. And I just want to make sure that, you know, there's consideration for, you know, centering and concentrating that activity, and that the intentionality that you've shown with this master plan also includes that cultural space, which now appears to be somewhat of an afterthought. So I just wondered if you had particular intent for that cultural space and reason for it being so disconnected from the rest of the activity centers that you've begun to create.
Yeah, Iran, if you don't mind, could I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So one, we don't look at the cultural space as disconnected. We look at the cultural space as a mistake that Fulton Market as a neighborhood made by not including one. And now I don't want to say it's too late. It's just going to be very difficult to plan one. And where do you put it? And who wants to volunteer to do it? We want to, because we want it here. We think this neighborhood is an extension of Fulton Market District. So you very easily could go to this cultural space coming from the east or the west. If you're coming from the east, you've crossed the Grand Street Bridge. You're staring right at it as you come up to it. Whether you take the Blue Line train and get off and walk a block and a half to it, however you get there, you'll get there. And you still could either enjoy food and beverage in this neighborhood, a cup of coffee, a water, a meeting, or walk the short distance of less than 6 minutes and be in Fulton Market District. So we don't look at it as disconnected, as we also, Leslie, are faced with tough sites. I'm not looking for any sympathy, but these are a lot of them are rectangles. So a lot of them are triangles. This was the one rectangle we have, and there's nothing we can do to accommodate this type of space of column free and ceiling height inside the Salvation Army building. So the one time we finally had a site large enough, this was the site we had. In fact, the slide that Iran has up right now is showing, there's another slide that I don't know we've included in this deck, where you're looking down Grand Avenue from the 3 Blue Line station entrances and exits, staring towards that cultural space. So actually, I think it's a benefit by putting it where we're putting it, because we're welcoming the other neighborhoods to come to it from the east, from the north, from the south, from the west, and it's still part of this neighborhood. I do also want to add that while this is the property that we own, that we refer to as NOMA, of course, the Tribune Media site is adjacent to us, and there are a number of parcels that their site has that continues us all the way over to the river. Those are owned by them, not by us, but they have already been approved in a 2018 plan development. I don't know if that will change or not change. The point is there is significant development on the other side of us to the east, all the way to the river. So that was one comment I wanted to make. The other comment is I do slightly disagree with you on the open space within our block. I 100% agree with you that public right-of-way space, collaborating with CDOT, DPD, the Commission on Design, and many other consultants, architect, landscape, etc., to do something amazing for both Union for the 2 blocks, as well as with Hubbard, and not just the blocks that bound us, but to advocate for it being a 1 mile long park and art park, starting at the Ogden train station and coming all the way towards Blummer Chocolates. But I feel that if we don't continue to do things like 167 Greens Muse, 170 Greens Muse, then we will continue to build Chicago where we're lot line to lot line, and we're blocking anyone who doesn't belong from coming inside. And I feel very passionate and strongly that by building muses, which are open air arcades, for those of you that haven't been to either of these, well, only one muse is built at 167, but 170 is approved. And if we don't build these plazas, all we're doing is repeating a history of building lot line to lot line and blocking people from being part of that and experiencing public realm space on what is essentially private property. And a great example of 167 Green is a piece of art that we hung with the Astor Gates, which is the Rothschild's Liquors Mama's Milk piece. It's a 700-pound sign that had traveled the world, ended up in Shanghai during the pandemic, and I asked him to please bring it back so we could hang it and honor him and honor his work on the South Side of Chicago as an artist and the things he's done in real estate on the South Side. If we had hung that in a traditional lobby of our office building, there's not a single person on this Zoom today that would have the right to just go inside our building and see it. But because we opened up our space on the ground floor and created the Muse, we've now welcomed anyone to come see it, read about it, shoot a photo, post it on Instagram, etc. So I'm not disagreeing with you in the sense that I do absolutely agree with public right of way, and that should be what we celebrate as often as we possibly can and work with the city to make it incredible. But we also feel passionately that we have to open up our buildings at grade have our food and beverage spill onto our private property and not always just onto sidewalks. So we think that both work harmoniously together to build a stronger neighborhood for Chicago and a model for Chicago, so we can take that into multiple neighborhoods throughout Chicago.
Well, I don't have much to add. Jeff should have been an architect and not just a developer. But I do want to say quickly, Leslie, that your question is coming very often in discourse on our around the industry of the future of cities. Because on one hand, you want to bring activity back to the streets. And the tool that we used to have is program at the ground floor, retail predominantly. And that doesn't work as well as it used to be. But what we've starting to learn is that if we create anchor of pocket of activities, they enhance more pedestrian activity at the street that they're adjacent to. Like, for example, the amount of traffic that the Highline have created in all the side streets of Chelsea, where people are kind of going back and forth for that. I also want to say with the theater or the public institution on G, is we still see that kind of development as an anchoring point between the CTA train stations on Halsted and Milwaukee and the riverfront development. Urbanistically, that would be right at the center between the two. So that kind of allows people in a 5-minute walk along Grant to go back and forth from a train station, but also from the riverfront development, as well as the park on the river.
Ron, can you stop sharing for just 1 second to Juan's earlier comment? I just wanted to share a different screen and it won't let me. Thank you. I'll make this very brief. Juan, you asked about my comment of it feeling a little bit like the Highline, and hopefully, can everyone see an image of the building? Okay, good. This is a shot with a drone. We actually have a ton of photography. We did the same thing with the original WeWork building known as the Amity Packing Building. We did this with Soho. We send in an architectural photographer who's a friend of ours. They shoot incredible of neighborhood, the building all over the place, inside, outside. And then we bring them back when we're done with a project in order to have, you know, what it once was, what it will become. But this is a great shot of what we were just talking about. It unfortunately won't be our Highline anytime soon. You're right, there's a lot of noise over here. I think that was someone else's comment. We did successfully build the Hoxton Hotel with 182 keys, 50% of which face an L train from an SDC rating. The sound of an L train for, I believe it was 4 seconds, is the sound of a jet engine. And we were able to make it such that you can sleep at the Hoxton. Lucky for us, we have another train. Also lucky for us, it's not as loud as the L train, but it is a different noise. And we've been studying it and running our tests so it's such that we can address all of the windows that face the train, as well as the windows that face the south when the train curves on its way into Oakville Station. But these are just some, what I think are some incredible images of what this building looks like. Unfortunately, this is in black and white and not in color. It is a beautiful red brick building and just has a lot of great heritage that we have been with Jake studying. We actually won the ability to buy this building in 2019. It just happens that we closed on it in 2022 because of the pandemic. But Jake and our team and our partners have been studying this building for multiple years in order to figure out how to lay it out and make it an incredible icon and gem icon in the standpoint that water tower in this building, ironically, you can see from basically most places in Chicago. It's sort of the Where's Waldo of water towers. And we're very excited about the delicate rehab we intend to do to that building.
Yeah, Jeff, those pictures are captivating. There's something about the black and white that I think even adds to that experience. I think the other thing that was really telling about that photo is because the train is on the bend, and that comes to my point about the arrival and departure. Your side is so visible, and I happen to be one who's less worried about train noise, but you know, you're really announcing yourself to passengers, right? Whether it's, and the same thing with the Ohio feeder, both on inbound and outbound. You really announce yourself in such a unique way because of the scale of the buildings. That is such an unbelievable opportunity.
It's also interesting, and I know that John Ronan is waiting to speak next, but just briefly, on this block in particular to the north, our west neighbor is the concrete embankment of this train track. So it's very rare that you find a block where you almost don't have neighbors across the street, other than, of course, the track itself, the embankment of the track. So you're right, it's seen by so much, from train to the automobile sitting in a parking lot twice a day on the Ohio feeder, Ontario feeder, driving along Grand Avenue, walking by on Grand Avenue, but yet you get to this block and all of a sudden it's so quiet right now. I hope we can maintain some of that, but of course with food and beverage in a hotel, we will of course have guests, but it is just sort of like this, it's so there, but also it's so serene standing in front of the building.
Jeff, thank you. I just want to make sure we have time to get to Brian Lee here for some additional comments.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't see Brian.
That's right. Yep.
Hi. So maybe some short comments, because I think that some of the things have been covered already. Obviously, I think the team has a strong track record and I think a good strategy about how to take these sites that oftentimes are leftover sites, industrial, not too attractive to people, but really turn them into something very positive, has a lot of value, different, and really, I think, touches on really what people are interested in terms of that, everybody uses the word authentic, but a quality that's different from every other run-of-the-mill development. So I think this is great. I think with maybe the committee is trying to say that the key to, I think, your project is multiple levels of connectivity and identity. And how do you do that when you have the train tracks crossing both Grand and Union? Because, the diagrams at first to me were a little confusing, because I thought, great, there's these pedestrian passages and lanes and connections that all seem to be kind of quite great. It's very permeable and very porous. I think that's really positive in terms of creating that human scale experience, which, everybody loves, and there's no question about that. But I think spatially, those tracks do create condition, both across Grand and Union, that you're probably very aware of. So I would just personally encourage you, first, continue on developing the internal, you call them muse, it could be alleys, gallerias, there's great spaces like that across cities all over the world. Melbourne uses its alleys, London has the kind of arcades. Just continue to develop that porosity through the sites, because I think you're able to create those different urban experiences. But I also think that you have to maybe push the city and CDOT in terms of what you can do on Union Street. I think something that is maybe stronger than just saying it's pedestrian, but maybe really a bold idea about a new kind of urban space, whether it includes a different kind of landscape. It could still be hard. There's classic examples of beautiful plazas, linear plazas that have great tree canopies over in Europe. Just, work with your team, your design team, because I think that they would have some fabulous ideas about giving Union Street a very strong identity. And then I do think that there was a good, valid point about Grand, that, that's probably the most heavily trafficked street in the cities of people going west, east and west. And so how do you actually create identity and a sense that it's just not, a speedy way to get back and forth from east to west? And especially if the cultural center is there, can you also then leverage your discussions with not only the city, but also people are doing the casino site in terms of thinking about what they're doing on that southern end of the property, which obviously connects to the river. So I think that story of not only the porosity through blocks, Union Street, and then Grand as one of the major connectors that then obviously has high visibility is really important to your project. And then finally, maybe, just personally, I prefer the single tower. I think that, the lower buildings, you could make an argument that they're part of a transition down to a lower scale from the center city. But I do think it creates a wall. And I think that 1,000 units of housing, you're just going to put people facing each other, and it's going to probably have, less desirability of, vis-a-vis issues and creating that urban wall. So I prefer the single tower.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to say the comments from my colleagues about the three-dimensional aspects of this project. Clearly, we think alike, and they resonate with our 20-minute presentation of what's really kind of pre-concept. It's going to continue and evolve. We are investigating every aspect in a three-dimensional experiential way, and the tiering by which the public and communal gathering spaces are gathering both physically and visually to create this activation of ground. So you don't just walk in a canyon of buildings, but you have a tiered three-dimensional experience from all directions is something that is one of the main principles here. But I only hope, and I'm sure that we will meet with this committee as this continue and develop, and really appreciate the comments that were made. So thank you.
All right. I believe that might have been the last comment, unless John Ronan is still around and wants to ask or mention anything.
I would just add that when you're dealing with a project with this many parcels, the question becomes, how is the project more than the sum of its parts? And so it's kind of a test I would use for the viability and the success of the project. The second thing I would say is, in the first slide, it stated that the project places a high importance on the pedestrian realm. However, the presentation was filled with aerial views and massings and plans. There were no views that supported this contention that it was about the public realm. So we'll take that more as a statement of intentions, I think, which I fully support. And the muse is maybe the answer to both of these questions, with this intra-block public space. And I'm wondering if the art walk could not be on the muse rather than on Grand Avenue, to give people a reason to take this path from beginning to end. And it doesn't have to be solid galleries all the way through, but could that experience create a site-specific installations by artists, galleries, things that would really give this thing a different character than anything in particular the Fulton Market area to the south?
Ron, I'll start if that's okay. John, thank you. The answer is yes. That muse, specifically on the Milwaukee portion, where there is a portion that's covered, is intended to have art in it, like the first muse that has been built, the second one that we're doing in Fulton, and then expanding on that and continuing to bring art through it. The idea was that there was art painted on the art walls along Hubbard from Ogden all the way down to Blomers. As you come across Fulton to the north, or what is technically not Fulton, but you're in the north side of the Hubbard tracks, the raised elevated tracks, that art would then be able to continue through all of our blocks, A, B, C, G, all the way to H. And under the, with Salvation, we will have art in the building, less on building with that building, but all the other buildings can have art on them, as well as inside of them, as well as outside of them. So the connectivity under the track was, as I think we've all noticed, unfortunately, Metra and Union Pacific do not necessarily keep their tracks in the best condition, both from a cleanliness standpoint, as well as there's been a lot of graffiti all over their embankments and their tracks for a very long time. So to be able to clean a lot of that up and then connect it from block to block, in our opinion, is just as important as connecting the pedestrian flow, as connecting the green space. All of it has to work together. It can't be one favored over the other. The reason why we didn't show as much on the ground floor as we did massing is all of that needs to be planned and has not been fully vetted yet. So that's why we weren't presenting that portion, but look forward to being able to share that with this committee. But it is planned, and it's all for sure in Iran's in my brain. It just needs to make its way onto a piece of paper in full.
All right. I think that will do it for this project. So we'll probably need to move on to the next. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much again. It was nice meeting you all.
So we will now move on to the second item on the agenda. To the applicant team, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You have about 20 minutes to present your proposal. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after each presentation. Whoever is controlling the presentation can go ahead and start sharing your screen. Perfect. So the second item on the agenda is 655 West Madison Street, located in the 42nd Ward. 655 West Madison is a commercial office development proposed in the near west side, located between the Loop and West Loop. The proposal consists of 1.5 million square feet between a 39-story building along West Madison Street and a 29-story building along West Monroe Street. The project seeks to accommodate various company needs by providing multiple floor plate sizes with dedicated fresh air intake systems. Amenities will include a 1-acre elevated park, ground floor retail, a covered porte cochere, a conference center, and a wellness center, along with other workplace amenities throughout. Please proceed with the presentation and state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Josh. I'm Dominic Aducci, the Director of Development at the John Buck Company, and I'm excited and happy to present a project that we have been working on for a very long time under a number of different iterations. And as Josh said, we're showing today a mixed use, primarily office building, and it is on a site bordered by Des Plaines Street, Madison, Monroe, and the John Kennedy Expressway. So it's got enormous visibility, and we look upon it as a gateway to downtown Chicago and a link between the quickly developing West Loop and West areas, reaches of the city with the traditional central business district of Chicago. So very pivotal site and a very high visibility, and we're really developed a design worthy of this location in the city. I am going to let the architects describe what we've done, but I will tell you what we as developers have asked them to do here in the design, the program, and the image of this building. As I mentioned, a gateway, important quality of the site, enormous amount of indoor-outdoor space in response to the ever-evolving office market after COVID. We have commissioned the design team to develop a set of amenities and both public and tenant amenities that are every bit rivaling Fulton Market, but without the congestion, I might add. And it's got the cutting edge of one of the more contemporary projects with the deep quality commitment that's known. John Buck Company is known very much for. This concept of ESG is very important to the design, and the architectural team is going to walk you through the many pieces of that. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the office market before I turn it over to the design team. And that is that we are finding that everybody knows it's a difficult office market right now because there's so much uncertainty post-COVID. But we are finding that there is a flight to quality. And that's why this building is being developed in a way that's that is going to be, I think, the most cutting edge and high quality building in the city when it's completed. I want to turn it over to our team, and I've got with me today Scott Borstein from Neal and Leroy, our land use advisor and attorney. And the design team is comprised of HOK and JGMA. So Juan needs no introduction to this group. And Peter Ruggiero is representing HOK, in the design presentation. And we've got a presence from our landscape designer. Also, I think Brad McCauley's on the phone from site design. So with that, I'll turn it over to Juan to start the description of the building.
Thank you, Dominic. I think Scott wanted to say a couple words.
Thanks. Yeah, right. I know we're limited on time, so I'll just quickly. This is a somewhat unique project in that it's coming before the Committee on Design, not because it's required under the plan development. This is already an approved location for this building under the current plan development, as long as we, of course, comply with the terms of the PD, which this design does. And so, but in the course of our process with planning and the site plan review process, they asked us to come before the committee, which of course we welcome, and your feedback and so forth. And so we're hoping, that after we get the feedback from you, then we can complete the planning process with the department, and and then move forward with the construction.
Thanks, Scott. And everyone, for the record, I'm Juan Moreno with JTMA. I just want to tee this up for the rest of the design team. And I'm just going to quickly go through these images. It is a unique site because it's neither the loop and it's not the West Loop. It's somewhere in between. And it has such a unique potential of connectivity from Metro to CTA to bus to bicycle, and also from an off-ramp and on-ramp scenario. It's really unique where Madison and Monroe border on the north and south because they're two-way streets at that block. Certainly to the east it changes, but all that helps us as it relates to just procession to the site. And again, just some of the surrounding use. Again, it's equally interesting because the building to the west has a dialogue with the expressway that's sunken. To the north is a ComEd substation, the presidential towers, which dissipates as it goes away, and then to the south, the church. So all that plays an interesting role in just the way we explored the building. This is also really important to us, just the access via car to the site, where we're entering from Monroe, limiting curb cuts on especially the bicycle-friendly displays. And then just some images that we took from various vantage points of the site. Monroe and Des Plaines, and the previous was Madison, Des Plaines. Again, other images looking towards the northeast of Monroe. Madison, again, President Towers, a view from above, where you really start to see the unique characteristics of the site, and not to mention just the area, just the sheer mass of the site is quite unique for this exploration between teams. We took a look in a two-tower scenario at some precedents of successful interaction between towers and podiums and how they play a role in things that we were exploring. And then the conceptual evolution, as Dominic said, it's been an interesting journey now for me, nearing 4 years, where in 2019, where we presented this, we were looking at big floor plates because we had that unique land. Well, a lot changed in 2020. And then it was more about more intimate settings in office spaces and tighter floor plates. And that created a much taller project. Where we are today is a two-tower scenario, as you can see to the right in the current exploration. And then even in the language of tower and podium, looking at, anchoring the towers to the ground or having this distinct separation between the tower and the podium. And then where we arrived at this language of connectivity between tower and podium. And then conceptually, just, the history of the site, it's fascinating. It's this really intriguing location. There's a conversation of the Cardone de Cumanes grids meeting the diagonal grids, but also going all the way back to the Burnham plan. And you can see that this was a really unique site where this kind of radial conversation, and this is something that's going to play out when you see the landscape plan, this idea of mapping, if you will, the two grids overlapping and just taking a snapshot of the past and having it overlay in the concept. And then just briefly, looking at, a simple extrusion of this site and how that starts to inform this idea of creating a void in between the two, where the language of the void has a conversation, an intimate conversation with the elevated park space, the intentional staggering of height between the two, and then creating human scale. And then looking at the separation between tower and base, but then again, looking at procession and entry on Madison, distinct entry on Monroe, looking at the language, a horizontal language is so evident on towers because of the floor plates, but instead of shying away from that, we're really embracing it. And it allows us to connect between tower and base. And then this incredible opportunity where the appearance of the building is really driven by the notion of the fresh air at each floor, and that how that reinforces the language of movement from base all the way up the tower. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Emilio Padilla.
I'd like to just say that we have about, we're about halfway through. So thank you.
Thanks, Juan. Looking at the program of the project, well, here's a diagram that we created to show the program diversity, looking at from left to right here as we move. One of the key features of this project was this notion of an elevated park that really led us to this exploration of how we treated the tower and the podium. And then the retail, that how we look at street activation and how this area could benefit from that. And then include 3 levels of parking that reside within the podium. And then, as Dominic mentioned, there's a series of tenant amenities throughout the podium on the upper levels that have a direct connection to that rooftop park. And then up in the tower are elevated reception level, and then rooftop amenities in both towers. 1.5 million square feet of office space. And then here we're going to flip through the plans really quickly and look at just a couple different levels of each plan. This image here really shows how the towers are split outward as they rise up, carving out this void for the park below and that direct connection to the highway. The landscape plan here that looks at how we treated the strategy for both phases, where we keep that open green space, and then the grade plaza phase 1 to the left off of Monroe, and then the rooftop park expansion phase 2 to the diagram to the right. Here at the ground level, we're showing phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 to the left and phase 2 to the right. I'm going to focus my comments on the phase 2, but just to give you a comparison of the two. The main entry is off of Madison and Des Plaines here. As you see, we've stepped it back to have a widened sidewalk. And then the second tower entrance is off of Monroe here to the left. And then up on the mezzanine level for back of house. Next slide. So on the second level, we have an enclosed portico share with partial parking, and then a lobby connection that connects you from the first tower to the second tower. We have 3 levels of parking starting from the second, or 3, 4. And then the 5th level is the tenant amenity that includes a conference center and wellness with a vertical internal connection to the lounge pre-function space up on the podium rooftop. And then up on here at the podium rooftop, where we have this elevated park, we have the lounge and pre-function space.
Now I'll hand it over to Peter Ruggiero with HOK.
Okay, thanks, Juan. So the towers are driven by the expectation of the market, of a Class A commercial high-rise development. The 2 towers, the first phase A to the right on the north side of the site, phase B to the left on the Monroe side of the site. As we continue up, they are developed really about this idea of distinctive addresses for the tenants. So as you'll see in this section in a few seconds, that there are moments in the floor plates as the tower progresses that give the tower, that are distinctive to each of the floor plates and for the tenants, and give the tower part of its characteristics. The towers are also a signature element of the tower is the opportunities to create balconies for the tenants that are distributed through the west side of the elevations of the towers. The towers, the numbers, each tower is 27,000 square feet on the high rise and 30,000 on the low rise. These are gross numbers. The elevations of the tower really, as Juan was saying, it's comes from this idea of the composite idea of connectivity of the two towers, and that the exterior facades, the east, west, and north and south of the towers really express this very strong spandrel, this articulated spandrel, which is all about bringing in natural air. So the building has gills, if you will, functional gills to bring natural air into each floor, allowing for perhaps the freshest and best fresh air in a commercial building post-pandemic. The other interesting thing about the towers are the two towers as they face each other, they take their facades, they take on a different reading, so that there's this exterior which speaks to the city, and then the kind of the two facades that face each other are very pristine and crisp in an effort to have this dialogue between the towers, and then the dialogue of the towers and their place in the city. The section clearly shows those opportunities for dual height, double height spaces in the towers, as well as the opportunities that exist as the tower, at the setbacks of the first tower in particular, where it has the larger floor plates, to create these new addresses within the tower vertically. And then I think this.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say that, very distinctive quality about the site and the towers, the massing, is the duality of the two towers, and how it creates this opportunity for a new signature element on the skyline, especially from the west, looking to the skyline at the east. Seeing the context of the towers of the development in within the neighborhood, and the sectional profiles of the adjacent buildings.
I was just going to add a little bit of a footnote on the fresh air. The concept for the building, which has been very well received by prospective tenants in the marketplace, is that every floor has its own isolated exhaust and intake, so that there's never a mix of air between floors or among the floors in the building. There are no common shafts for fresh air intake or exhaust. So there's a fan unit on every floor. It is both a very highly efficient managed system by being able to control, down to the office really, how much you operate and how you operate the mechanical system. But it was primarily a matter of objective of this sort of healthy air concept of isolating the exhaust and the intake on every floor.
Hi, I'm going to interrupt to say that we have 4 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay. Juan?
Yep. Emilio, if you just take us through the renders.
We have a series of images that look at phase 1 and phase 2. So we'll flip through them very quickly. This one looking southwest at the main entry off of Madison and Des Plaines as a phase 1 scenario. The next one here looking straight west. And again, it really reemphasizes what all the items that Peter was mentioning, and showing how the towers are splaying out, carving out the void. Phase 1 looking straight west.
I might, if you just hold a second there, I want to add that there's been a lot of attention paid also to these entry plazas and indoor-outdoor space at grade along Des Plaines. It's anticipated that there would be a significant restaurant on Des Plaines that would face the street and have indoor-outdoor dining and a bit of a setback from the street. And then there's an entry plaza at both corners after both phases are completed. Both here, the inset that you see at Madison and Des Plaines, and a similar when it's done on Monroe for the second phase. Go ahead, Emilio.
Yeah, and then so in that second phase here, we're looking at the main entry for the second tower off of Monroe, looking northwest. Phase 1 looking at the plaza. Here in this image, we're looking southeast, and again, emphasizing the high visibility from the Kennedy Expressway. And then the phase one, and then here, view looking east towards the city skyline, just showing the impact the project has on the city skyline from the western boundary of the loop. And then we included a series of interior images just showing the main entry, the enclosed portico share that we mentioned in the plan, and then the tenant lounge level that's looking out towards that elevated park on top of the Podium rooftop.
I'm just going to quickly go through this before Josh cuts me off, but sustainability is not lost on this entire team, and even the idea of the fresh air is important to all of us. So the organization of the tower so that the predominant facades face north-south, and so you don't have the impact of the east and west sun is something that was intentional for this team. Also, the importance of bird migration and knowing the impacts that our city is causing on that. And the design elements such as the gills work to our advantage. And that composition is, we've been working with a bird consultant, is advantageous in the language and also mitigating the impact of birds. And then lastly, just a section through that, the air concept, the fresh air intake on one side and the exhaust on the other side plays such a prominent role in just the overall sustainability. With that, Josh, I think I did it with 1 minute remaining.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. So thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask any committee members who are associated with this project to please recuse yourself now. And for the remaining committee members who are members, please take a moment to review any comments received from the public, which I don't believe we have any. Otherwise, the floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant. Please feel free to raise your Zoom hand and we will call on you. And feel free to leave the presentation up, as that might help with the discussion.
That's perfect.
Hi, Leslie. Do you want to go first?
Was silent for too long. Thank you for your presentation. This is a really exciting project. It's personal to me because my daughter went to FXW OSP, which is right across the street from this. And so very familiar with the area, spent a lot of time queuing in line in front of that school, used the parking lot that this building will be on. And so I understand the site challenges, especially with all the work that's going on, going through this portion of the loop on the expressway. So, you know, thank you for being thoughtful and sticking with this project for so many years. I know it's been, you know, difficult at times. I guess just a couple kind of comments that I had. One is, you know, I know this project is happening in phases. And so you know, after phase one is built, it looks like, if I understood the renderings correctly, there may be some blank walls. And so I just wondered, and I know that you've made a provision for a public plaza, and you've designed it, and you've, you know, sort of thoughtfully approached historically the Burnham plan. And I think that that's a really nice way of approaching it. I just wondered how you were thinking about that transition from phase one to phase two, and maintaining, you know, public space and also giving something, you know, back to the community that, you know, was visually appealing while you were waiting for phase two to happen.
Well, let me start with Leslie. I thank you that we had some similar questions in the past about this. And one of the important elements, I want to just say we articles and some publicity really out there lately, and the momentum on leasing has really picked up, and we're very optimistic at this point about getting it going, especially because with phases it takes a little less pre-leasing to get started. And one of we're coming to the conclusion that it's very likely that by the time we're done with phase one, we'll be ready to start phase two based on the recent experience we have with the tenant presentations and our efforts to pre-lease. But notwithstanding that, we're looking at a need really to enclose the podium on the south side between phases, no matter what we do, which eventually they're gonna open up. Exactly what that facade is, we're extremely willing to work with DPD and with this group in terms of helping us. We want to spend as little from an economic sense that that we're going to throw away, and also, frankly, from just from a ESG kind of perspective, which we're very conscious of. We don't want to throw away a lot of material and so forth. Some of the ideas we've had are, a conventional wall, but again, that's garage primarily that you're going to see in the cut once you get above the first two floors, and we may want to enclose that and not show it. We've also got some concepts that we're considering of public art that might be a really interesting thing, because we could later perhaps take it into one of the other open spaces if it was there now to kind of define the cut edge of phase one. And then the plaza, we're looking at really primarily just landscape and kind of a leisure little respite, which this part of the city really needs.
Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say this is a very exciting project, and I think the facade and the integration of the podium and tower is really interesting and different, and is going to be new for the city of Chicago. So I commend you on that. And also the really interesting spaces within the tower, making it more than just an extruded tower with no interest on the facade is going to be really interesting and new. I did want to mention, just as comment, I had one question as to whether the park in between the two towers is going to be at all open to the public, and if so, how that would be handled. And the other comment I had was, it is a pretty large podium. In Chicago, we don't tend to have a lot of very tall podiums just because of the way the downtown is developed and the previous zoning. So I wondered if the scale of that was ever considered, if underground parking was ever looked at, and just how it feels when you're up close to it. I don't think there's a lot of pedestrian views. That was something John Ronan mentioned on the other project, and I think it's valid for this one as well. How does it feel to be next to the 6-story podium, and how are you going to use the architecture to alleviate the mass of that, especially when you get next to the school and next to the church in scale, would be another question I would hope you could comment on.
Yeah, let me take a shot at both of them, and I'll throw out for a lifeline to the design people at one point. But in terms of the access to the podium park, we have it will be accessible to the public. How that's being done, we have considered a lot of different ways. It is up in the air a bit just because of the functionality in the podium. So there will be, and I would say there's a very good example of this working well where Gibson's Italia is, because there is a, we have a unique elevator and stair that's dedicated from the street to the Podium park. So it would allow people to get in whether or not they went in through the elevator core of the building. That's the current answer to the first question. As far as the scale at the street, there are a number of different, and I don't know that we have, Emilio, who's driving right now?
I am Dominic.
Okay, I don't know if you have any of the close-up images along the bottom of the building, but Sarah, the concept for the human scale, which we're very aware of, is these carve-outs. So there are all of these different sort of events as you go around the base of the building. It's not just, wall that you're overwhelmed by the building. There's a number of these different little, almost front porch type, arrangements where you're a little bit in, a little bit out, you're exposed, and yet you've got some shelter. So there's a sense of a human scale that will be very evident, I think, as you walk around the bottom of the building at street level. I don't know if any of the architects want to add anything.
Yeah, but before we hear from the designers, just want to remind everyone, really the expectation of COD is a peer review. And so, we'd really like to hear from the designers in terms of responding primarily to the questions. And obviously, I know we had a precedent with the last presentation where the developer was kind of leading, but would appreciate if we could kind of stick to that convention. And obviously, Dominic, feel free to chime in. But by and large, we really feel it's appropriate for the designers to walk us through the design.
Sure. I will add that unlike the last developer, I'm a licensed architect, but anyway. I'm in remission, so I'll speak for the designers.
Peter, did you want to add anything there?
Well, Juan, it's basically the idea about the podium is that it's an active. It really, as Dominic mentioned, it really yearns to be an active facade and an active member of the street. Some of the adjacent buildings, where they are they're a positive in terms of their sectional profile. It becomes a negative in terms of the sectional profile of the building, of the podium. So you could start to see those vertical relationships emerge on the podium. And as the podium activates, touches the sidewalk, touches the ground, and activates those places.
What do you mean by activating those spaces?
Yeah, the areas directly adjacent, the corners, for example, and and Juan, if you could highlight where the restaurant is, and the potential connection to the podium, to the floor of the podium via the stair.
By the way, I agree with the comment. Some street views would have been good, but the best we can do at this point is just zoom in.
Brian, do you want to go next?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I had to move a little bit. I think that the project is very interesting to me, primarily because it is a project that obviously has incredible access, as demonstrated by design team, and I think that its prominence and presence in the city it's a very important site. But I kind of take note of what I think Dominic said about the market today, and that, you know, people are moving to quality. They're moving to places where they have ability to pitch to their tenants, and whether it be headquarters or small tenants, that it's going to be a place that is vibrant, it's connected to a city, it's got all the virtues of excitement of being with others, you know, collaborating, and it beats working from home, right? So you guys all know this, and I think that the whole office market is really contemplating, debating, and trying to see where all of this is going to hit it up. Many of us believe things are going to get a little bit back to normal, but there's going to be a lot more understanding of what the workplace might be in the future. And I think that one thing that strikes me is that how do you actually develop such a big project, knowing that this is a huge investment, and knowing that you want to future-proof this development, make sure it creates value and retains that value, and doesn't become just a white elephant or a dinosaur that people aren't going to be desirable or desiring. So the developer and the design team, you know, it's a really strong team. You guys know what to do. You guys have been doing it for years, and you know, I have great confidence in the design team in terms of coming up with ideas, and great confidence in the developer being able to implement this. But I hope that you would also think that here's a project, particularly in this period of time, that requires really strong thinking about what to do, and not only the right thing to do from a public benefit point of view, but also what's the right thing to do in terms of the kind of product that you're going to be building that's going to last for 50 to 100 years. So I just say that because, you know, I recognize all the elements of this project. There's a formula that we all know about in terms of lease bands and cores and orientation and you know, the base of the project, activating the streets, putting the access for parking and service in the right places. And all those things are pretty well known. So those things don't have to kind of be regurgitated. I hope that you guys would think about really what's the public benefit of this project that not only is for the city and as citizens of Chicago, but really driving maybe the value of your property higher. Can you actually lead in terms of developing something that's new, innovative, speaks to what the office market really wants to work in, and then thinks about the tectonics of the building in terms of its innovations, in terms of construction and operations and sustainability and use materials, and certainly then adds beauty to the site. So right now I see it, the project as an island, even though it has great access. It's not really related to any other project around the surroundings. The activity around the base on Monroe and Madison and Des Plaines is okay. It has parking that separates that rooftop podium from the ground level in a pretty dramatic way. I think you could ask the question, do you need that much parking of the 200, I think I counted 266 spaces with 261 spaces that, well, maybe you do, but you know, a lot of places with such great access, maybe it doesn't need quite so much parking, and could you actually lower it down? I think that I was interested in the single tower versus the two towers proposals that you guys have went through over the past years. And I think that the opportunities in the single tower would have been better because you might have been able to develop that base and podium in maybe a different way with other uses and potentially other conditions of open space or transition to the podium. To me, the buildings are pretty understandable and not really groundbreaking in terms of the lease spans, the center core. I do note that, you know, there's potentially some terraces and amenity cutouts and balconies and that type of thing. But I think that people are looking for better access to daylight, which generally tends to be narrow lease spans, but also sometimes big floor plates and sometimes small floor plates. So it suggests maybe a wider variety of things that you might provide as a workplace environment. And then, you know, finally, I'm not sure about the innovations that you're doing in terms of performance, which, I think that, Chicago has had the great tradition of trying to innovating in terms of that. So when you talk about natural ventilation, is it really natural ventilation, or is it just vents to 4x4 air handlers, and you're just bringing in through the spandrels? So, all of that is fine, whatever it turns out to be, but even the expression of the strong horizontal, which is kind of a nice horizontal expression, this freeway scale, tying the two buildings together in the podium, it doesn't really provide shading, on the west side. And the tapering condition, is a little bit irregular, and there's nothing on the south of the first tower. So, all of these things kind of combine together to, kind of pick at the project, but they kind of really relate to our larger issue of such, great developers and a very strong design team. Can you do more to really elevate the quality of architecture for particularly commercial architecture in the city of Chicago?
Would you like to have a couple of those items addressed, or were you just making suggestions, Brian?
Was I just spouting off? Look, respond to anything you like.
Well, I could, let me take the program issues a little bit. You mentioned the single tower. We very much were interested in doing this single tower, and that was, it was a phenomenal building. There's no question. It was 60-story building, significant height, and so forth. I will tell you, in today's market, there would be absolutely no way to finance a single tower of 1.5 million square feet on this site. And that is the realization we came to that drove us to the double tower scheme. And the difference is we can start this with a much smaller pre-leasing, and it will be a smaller pre-leasing than what we would need for the bigger building. It also gives us an opportunity to really see exactly where the market's going as we complete phase one. With regard to parking, it's always a trade-off, right? We'd all like to see everybody take public transportation, bikes, and walk and so forth, and it is a rather accessible site. However, what we're finding in the post-COVID office world is the ability, whether or not it stays this way long-term, the ability of people to park and drive rather than take public transportation is a significant decision point for tenants. And one of the strong advantages, in addition to the access from public transportation, is that we have five ramps, so we can go on or off from both streets to the Kennedy, with very little hassle on surface streets, and get in and out of the building that way. And that's something that, as much as we'd like it to be different, is a real consideration with tenants right now.
Yeah. And Brian, I'd also like to just address a few things you raised. Beginning with the parking, one of the things we definitely are doing with the parking is we're isolating the ramps so that the parking is level and not impacted by the ramping. And the parking is also oversized in terms of its floor-to-floor dimension. So there's the capacity built in that it can be additional, it could be a different function in the future. And, both Juan, Dominic, and I have constantly had this conversation over the last couple of months, last years, about the market and about the floor plates. And, the term that we kind of refer to is we don't want to do the last of the dinosaurs. And what's disappointing to find is that the market is not ready for a lot of things that we would love to do, and that the expectation on the market is still for the kind of 40 to 45 foot lease span center core. We did look at some of those early options that Juan talked about in terms of the evolution. Smaller floor plates, in the 20,000 range, especially for the upper floors. When the tower was taller, there was much more opportunity to have that kind of variety of floor plates. And floor plates at 20,000 square feet, getting down into the kind of 30-foot lease span. So much closer for quarter exterior wall dimensions. So.
I would add on, that reminded me of another question you had, Brian, about natural light. We have a 14-foot slab to slab height in the building. So we can have, and we've got an unbroken 10-foot span of glass. So a finished ceiling could easily be at the 10-foot mark. An open office concept would be, even more than that. But importantly, the glass itself is the full 10 feet. So we think that does add a lot of light to the building, despite the conventional lease span.
I believe, John, you're next.
Are you going to let Brad McCauley at least put some street trees on the parkway?
Well, Juan wouldn't let him show them to cover up the facade.
Oh, we'll get him in there. Don't you worry.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think if there are no other comments.
If we have just 1 minute, Josh, maybe I do want to sort of maybe nudge. We didn't get much of a chance to talk about the ground floor programming. If we could just take a quick minute to look at the ground floor plan and see if there's any comments relative to distribution of uses on the site in both the near and long term. I think that might be helpful. Then we can wrap up with something else.
Maybe just one comment as you get into that slide. Here's my idea for you guys. Build that first phase, site designs with your architects, a great sort of public park, open space. The market never recovers, and then you have a great single tower and a beautiful open space that sets a context for the whole entire neighborhood.
I would only challenge that idea with, the lobby then is completely separate from the entry plaza, which is like this big celebratory sort of, welcoming space for community. And the residential entry is then, far separated that in the lobby. It's more successful when there's two towers and there's double lobbies, like that intuitively sort of makes sense, one for each tower. But I would kind of wonder, if the first lobby, the first phase lobby is missing out on, some of the activity and vibrancy of that plaza for as long as it, the second tower isn't built. And, secondly, the retail off of the expressway entry ramp, there's a similar thing that happens on Washington, and the retail space really struggles to gain traction with tenants. And particularly, there's been a lot of discussion about post-pandemic kind of everything and innovation and how people's thought processes about work and working and their environments have changed. So similarly with retail, I'm sure, the developers on this call are very sophisticated, know that, retail trends have also changed significantly. And so I would just not want a new retail space to, come to any demise based on its, challenging location. And, with the retail lobby separated from, this celebratory space of community activation, which is the plaza, I question, the sort of public benefit and activity along the street that could be increased by combining some of those functions.
Leslie, just related to their retail, it's anticipated really that that's very likely going to be a casual food environment more than, kind of traditional retail. The restaurant, we're really looking at a named chef, an award-winning chef, kind of a really showcase, which I think this neighborhood really needs. you know, right
point
here.
is that corner location is really challenging. I understand there's visibility, you know, on that 100% corner, but it's at a exit ramp from the expressway. And so there's not a lot of visibility at that particular location. I just, you know, checking to make sure that that's the right place. If in fact, the goal of this development is to increase activity along Des Plaines and in the neighborhood.
I was wondering if someone wants to go up to the roof as a public space, how do they get there? It's not apparent here.
Emilio, are you there?
Yes.
Or one?
So we have 2 dedicated elevators that take you up to the podium rooftops in the center.
Is that the ones near the cafe?
So phase 1, you have.
Is it echoing? So maybe we could zoom in a little bit here, but the idea is that you would use the Tower 1 core to get up to that park. There would be a dedicated elevator for that access. And then over in the middle, near the loading, directly below the loading tag, there's a secondary means to bring you up to that level. They're shaded in a different, it's like a tan color. It's not very, it's just too small here to see.
But who's going to know how to do that? I'm guessing it's like a destination dispatch elevator system. So who's going to walk in this building, know what elevator to go to and how to get up to that space? It's really not a public space, and you shouldn't describe it as such. It's for the tenants of the building. And there should be some kind of public gesture. I'm reiterating something Brian Lee said. But it's like, what does this give back to the city? And is there anything here that elaborates or improves the public realm?
I can jump in a little bit on that one. You know, outside of the phase 1 park and plaza space that's represented there, I do think stepping back these buildings a little bit at the corners and edges does give a little bit more of the, you know, the public condition back at the building face. Whereas, you know, a lot of buildings that we're seeing are going lot line to lot line, and you're not really getting that. So it does allow a little bit more of a, I guess, a respite from the rest of the condition there. It provides a little bit more green space, open space, things that could be more designed and not necessarily just following streetscape standards or the standard landscape ordinance, doing a little bit more at the lobbies and retail plazas and all that.
John, was there anything else you wanted to discuss with this project?
No, I appreciate that sort of open dialogue we just had. So if there's other comments from the committee or the presenters, I think we can wrap unless a last call for comments.
Was there really natural ventilation? Right? Yeah, operable vents in the sill or something like that, or is it actually just going into the 4x4 air handlers?
It is going and exhausting from the floor-by-floor air handlers, but we do have we're planning every 3rd floor to have a balcony space also. So there's the available, and that option or access to both building public and, or, you know, for the whole building, public and private by tenant floor with a variety of outdoor space is an important part of this. We also have a little, it doesn't show here, but we've got into the amenity floor, there's a courtyard that's brought down from the park. So we're actually kind of penetrating the amenities themselves, the fitness center, the conference center, all of the different tenant amenities with outdoor space.
Okay, so I think that will conclude today's meeting. So before we adjourn, on behalf of DPD, thank you again for all of your critical thinking and thoughtful comments on these two important projects. The meeting will now come to a close. So we hope you all will come back soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.